And now, the presidential debate, or what passes for one in my show. Presidential candidate Gary Johnson is here, along with an imitation of President Obama. Reggie Brown may be an actor, but what he says tonight will be almost entirely the president's own words. I'll play the role of moderator. So, Gary Johnson wants to repeal your health care legislation, Mr. President, and cut spending on Medicare.
Well, let me be absolutely clear here. I will preserve these health care programs as a promise we make to each other in this society.
It was a promise.
I think that we should deliver health care to the poor and those over 65, and that we can do it, but that we can do it by spending a whole lot less money. And, Mr. President, I think we need to balance the federal budget. Medicare is going to completely engulf the federal budget here in a very short amount of time if we don't bring it under control.
But, Mr. President, you've said that these entitlements are crucial, are a big part of America.
Well, look, we are a better country because of these commitments. And furthermore, with the shrinking benefit to pay rising costs.
You want to shrink it by 43%?
I just think that if we don't address these issues, we're going to all be left with nothing. And that makes for a hard campaign to run, the notion that we all need to take on a little bit of pain here, but better that we take on a little bit of pain here rather than die as a patient. And I'm talking now about the United States and the fact that we would have a monetary collapse.
All right, you heard what candidate Johnson said about education earlier. What's your response to that, Mr. President?
Well, Gary Johnson's offering the same tired rhetoric about vouchers. Now, we need to fix and improve our public schools, not throw our hands up and walk away from them.
Well, and what do you say about the fact that the federal government gives states 11 cents out of every single dollar that they spend, but that it comes with strings and mandates attached to it, that it's really a negative for states to take federal money?
Well, I don't think it's fair to really ask him because he's actually just an actor. But he did say that your plan is basically throwing our hands up and walking away from the public schools.
I think that it's just the opposite, that it's this notion of embracing free markets, and free markets would include education. We might actually deliver better educational services for less money. That's a very real possibility. But it's not going to happen from Washington. It'll happen if you give it to the states and let the states innovate.
Governor Johnson, what would you do about trade?
I'm a free market guy, so when it comes to trade, believing in free markets, there's a magic to free markets. The Department of Commerce, that might be a good one to eliminate, in that just comes up with a whole lot of restriction that ends up inhibiting American business rather than enhancing it.
So no tariffs and no restrictions?
No tariffs,
let everybody,
no restrictions.
Jobs and goods move to China?
Jobs and goods, that we all benefit from the lower cost of goods and services, and that we embrace that notion.
Mr. President?
Now, Mr. Johnson supports unregulated trade. But for America to win, American workers have to win too. And that's why any agreement I support has to contain enforceable standards for workers.
Yeah, that sounds so good. You know, workers have to win too.
No, it does sound good. But what we do in this country is we pass laws that advantage corporations, individuals, groups that are well connected politically, as opposed to creating an environment where we all have a level playing field, with all of us having access to the American dream. The American dream being going from having nothing to having everything if we're willing to work hard and innovate.
Now, you propose tax cuts for the rich and would completely eliminate the corporate income tax. As a country that values fairness, wealthier individuals, those who have benefited most from our way of life, can afford to give a little more back.
But this is what a lot of people believe. The rich are filthy rich and can give back.
Well, what I hear all the time is that our corporations are overseas, that jobs have been leaving this country. Let's bring those jobs back to this country by making this country the only place to conduct business. So in that context, how do you do that? Eliminate the corporate income tax, understanding that it's a double tax, that we all own the corporations, and when income gets distributed to you or I, that's when we pay the tax on that.
Now, let's move on to the war on terror. Earlier in this program, we talked about Afghanistan, Iraq. We didn't quite touch on Libya. Mr. President, your position?
Listen, we must stand alongside those who believe in the same principles that we do. Our own future is safer if more of mankind can live with the bright light of freedom.
You know, I just think that military intervention in Libya is unwarranted A through Z. Number one, where was the military threat from Libya? Where was the congressional authorization to go into Libya? Where in the Constitution does it say that because we don't like a foreign leader, we should go in and topple that foreign leader? I like this. I really.
But what about...
Have we not interjected ourselves into a civil war here in Libya that is warranted in 5 other countries right now in the Middle East? I just don't see an end to this.
But a cruel dictator was harming innocent people, and our allies said, we need your help.
What we need to look at are the unintended consequences of these actions that we take. We take out Saddam Hussein in Iraq. He's the check. Iraq is the check against Iran. Now Iran is raising its head. I don't believe there is a military threat from Iran, but we should remain vigilant to what might be a military threat, but that results from taking out Saddam Hussein. So we do all of these good things in the name of liberty and freedom, and the consequence oftentimes ends up being much different. A more unsafe world and other dictatorships that just rise up to take over the old.
Let's close with the economy. Mr. President, you've been a big backer of some stimulus.
Now, make no mistake, only government can break the vicious cycles that are crippling our economy.
Boo!
Now, where a lack of spending leads to lost jobs, that leads to even less spending.
Which is why he says we need stimulus. You need to jumpstart the economy.
There are bubbles that are created in a free market system. I don't think they get quite as big, but if they do get as big, which perhaps they might, there's a day of reckoning, there's a fire sale, and that you end up with a steep decline and a recovery that begins immediately. That's the free market. I think the government has stepped in the way of the fire sale. That's why we find ourselves mired in this, in the economic...
made it worse?
I think the stimulus has made it worse, yes.
Mr. President?
Well, I think that now it's clear more than ever before that the Recovery Act has now created and saved more than 1 million jobs.
Well, and for all those jobs, I know that you've touted the savings of jobs in the automotive industry, for example. If the automotive industry would have been allowed to fail, gone into bankruptcy, I think that you could argue that General Motors would have emerged from that process as the true car company of the 21st century, as opposed to perhaps a dinosaur that's still on life support because of the government intervening. And in the case of bailing out the banks, these were individuals, these were banks that made horrible decisions that were bailed out at all of our expense. They should have been allowed to fail.
Yeah.
Thank you, Candidate Johnson and Mr. President. And I should say his words, again, were the words of the actual president. Stick around. In a moment, our audience gets to question you.